Hi, I'm Lisa McMann, and I live in Sacramento, California. I'm the author of the Unwanteds series and the Unwanteds Quest series. The Unwanteds begins in the world of Quill, and in Quill, it's against the law to do anything creative. So if you're a kid and you get caught singing or dancing or inventing something or even drawing in the dirt with a stick, at the age of 13, you'll be considered unwanted and you'll be sent to your death. Now, luckily, our characters don't all die because that would make it a really short book and be very sad. Something else happens. In fact, those unwanted children, including Alex, our main character, find themselves in a magical world called Arteme. And they're being kept hidden by the guy who's supposed to be putting them to death. Now, he's created this magical world, and he teaches those children to use their creative abilities to do magic for fun, but also to protect themselves in case they ever get discovered and have to fight. So that's a little bit about how the opening chapters of the Unwanteds begin. Now, one of the cool things about this story was when I was writing it, and I was starting to create that magical world. And I included my kids in helping me to create some of the magic spells that happen in the world of Arteme. In fact, they were 12 and 9 at the time. So, and my husband was there too. And the four of us would sit around the living room and talk about what kind of spells we could create using art supplies, like things you could find in an art classroom. And my daughter immediately, the 9-year-old, said, "What if you could take a paintbrush and paint yourself invisible?" And I loved that, and that made it into the story. And my son, who was 12 at the time, said, "What if you could take a handful of paper clips and throw them at your enemy, and they would go soaring out and stick through their clothing and stick them to the wall?" And I love that too. So that made it into the story as well. And as we were brainstorming all of these different spells, the kids would go back and forth trying to figure out like what the rules of each particular spell would be. Like, what if there was no wall behind the person who gets scatter clipped? What would happen then? And they determined that that person would just keep going and going until it did hit something. So it was a lot of fun trying to figure out all the rules of magic. And so I thought it could be really fun for you to think about, if you had a magical world, what would it be based on? Like mine is based on art supplies, the different magic spells. What would yours be? And what kind of things can you find around your own house or just in your imagination that could be used to do magic with? So that's my little assignment for you. And I thought I would just read the first chapter of the Unwanteds for you a moment. Chapter 1 is called The Purge. There was a hint of wind coming over the top of the stone walls and through the barbed wire sky on the day Alexander Stowe was to be purged. Alex waited in the dusty commons of Quill and felt the light breeze cooling the sweat on his upper lip. His twin brother Aaron stood beside him, their parents behind, and all around the entire community of Quill watched and waited, the bland look of sleeping fish on their faces. Mr. Stowe pressed his finger hard into Alex's back, a final poke in the kidneys, a last goodbye, Alex thought, or a warning not to run. Alex glanced at Aaron, whose face showed the tiniest emotion. Scared, was it, or sad? Alex didn't know. The high priest Justine, her long white hair undisturbed despite the breeze, rose to her full height and observed the silent crowd. She began without introduction or ado, for a purge was neither exciting nor boring. It just was, as many things just were in Quill. There were nearly 50 13-year-olds this year. The people of Quill waited to hear which of these teenagers had been marked as wanted or necessary, and by process of elimination, which of them remained to be purged. Alex scanned the group and their families around the giant half-circle of the amphitheater. He knew some of them, not all. Alex's mind wandered as the High Priest Justine announced first the names of the Wanteds, and he startled only slightly as the High Priest spoke Aaron's name. Aaron, who'd had nothing to worry about, sighed anyway in relief when he was among the 15 names called. The necessaries were next. 13 names were read. Alexander Stowe was not one of those either. Even though Alex knew that he was unwanted and had known ever since his parents had told him over breakfast when he was 10, the knowledge and 3 years of preparation weren't enough to stop the sweat that pricked his armpits now. It was down to a mere formality, unless there was a surprise, which there sometimes was, but it didn't matter. Everyone stood motionless until the final 20 names were called. Among the unwanted, Alexander Stowe. Alex didn't move, though his heart fell like a cement block into his gut. He stared straight ahead as he'd seen the other unwanteds do in past years. His lip quivered for a moment, but he fought to still it. When the governors came over to him, he put his arms out for them to shackle with rusty iron bands. He made his eyes icy cool before he glanced over his shoulder at his parents, who remained unemotional. His father nodded slightly and finally took his finger out of Alex's back after the shackles were secure. That was a minor relief, but what did it matter now? Aaron sniffed once quietly, catching Alex's attention in the silent amphitheater. The identical boys held a glance for a moment. Something like a jolt of energy passed between them, and then it was gone. "Goodbye," Aaron whispered. Alex swallowed hard, held the stare a second more as the governors tugged at him to follow, and then broke the connection and went with the governors to the waiting bus that would take him to his death. And on that note, I hope you enjoy the whole series. Thank you so much.